Retrospectors, have you had enough of listening to ads like this?
Well, did you know that supporters of the show at patreon.com/retrospectors get an ad-free feed?
So you can listen to us wherever you're listening to us right now, but skip all the ads.
Sign up now to skip the ads at patreon.com/retrospectors.
It's June 5th, 1833, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
So it was today in history in 1833 that 17-year-old debutante Ada Lovelace attended a party at the house of 41-year-old mathematician Charles Babbage, and so charmed the host that he invited her and her mother, all above board, to come back for a demonstration of his newly constructed difference engine, a 2-foot-high hand-cranked contraption that is not only thought of as a precursor to the modern-day computer, but which also led Ada down a path to being regarded as the world's first computer programmer.
Yeah, Ada was like a Netflix series protagonist that incels on Reddit would call too woke. She was both a glamorous debutante and a gifted scientific intellect, and she was the daughter of Lord Byron, as if that wasn't enough. But she had been invited to this shindig by one of her tutors, Mary Somerville. She was the preeminent female scientist of the era, obviously not a particularly competitive field. She was a brilliant mathematician, an astronomer, and a personal friend of Charles Babbage. So she invited Ada and her mother to come along. Her mother was also very intellectually gifted. And at first, Babbage seemed to have taken her as being kind of just a curious girl, and he was used to that because even the most educated people of the era were kind of struggling to pick up what this machine could actually be used for. It appeared to be a novelty, but they soon struck up a very lively correspondence about their shared passions that would last for 17 years.
Yeah, for all of Ada's life. And, you know, when you say people struggled to understand what Babbage's difference engine was, that's because it hadn't been invented yet. I mean, this is an obvious point, but I mean, like, for us now, it's very easy to explain what it is. It was a calculator. That's what it was. He invented a calculator. But then the idea that a machine would be able to make reliable calculations with the turn of a handle felt so pie in the sky, never mind the new, broader idea that they were about to hatch together. We'll get onto that too. It took someone who had a deep interest in science and mathematics to kind of understand it. And Ada was that person. Although, as you say, I suppose what was unusual was that she was a woman and that person. There were lots of gentlemen of the era who were kind of generally curious and educated and well off, who would spend their time doing science as a sort of hobby. Because this was an era, we've talked about this before, where science was something gentlemen dabbled in. That's why someone like Babbage, who was a middle-aged Cambridge academic, was having a party with hundreds of invitees, because you just invite everyone who was of the right sort of class to come along and pitch in with their ideas, really, and that's how science was happening. So what was unusual was that Ada, age 17, as a woman, was able to play that game.
Like we were saying, people found it hard to conceptualize what the difference engine could be used for. It's like, we can look back and say it was a precursor to the computer, but obviously they did not know that that was coming. They couldn't describe it in those terms. And even Babbage himself didn't really understand the full scope of what something like this, and the analytical engine, which was his follow-up, we'll get into that. He also struggled to not just conceptualize what they could be useful, but also to market it. What he really needed was somebody like Ada, who was very charming, very charismatic. You know, Babbage was kind of like your stereotypical cranky Don. He needed somebody who could really inspire people with how these very highbrow, very abstract concepts could actually be applied in the real world, and that's what she was very good at.
Yeah, because from birth, basically, she was the kind of person who get into any party because she was the daughter of Lord Byron, although actually she never knew him because he buggered off to Greece by that point and never came back. He did mention her in one of his poems. But she was brought up by her mother, who, as we were saying, also had this huge scientific interest. Byron had called Annabella, her mother, the princess of parallelograms. And she had hothoused Ada in every scientific and mathematical interest, all of the classic subjects, etc. At the age of 12, she produced the design for a flying machine herself. You know, bear in mind that this is, 1828. So she had ambition, but she also was someone that men, educated men, would grant the time of day to.
So through the course of their correspondence, Lovelace and Babbage began to engage with the latest idea that Babbage had about how his difference engine could be useful. And he called this thing the Analytical engine, this sort of future iteration of his device that would support a whole list of possible kinds of operations. And often he was good at figuring out very clever ways to implement those operations mechanically. And so she became kind of his foil, or I suppose you could almost call it a muse in some sense. She was helping him to land his ideas in a way that was more clear, even to the person himself. You know, he was kind of finding out ways that the analytical engine could be useful through his correspondence with Lovelace.
Yeah, she saw herself as doing what we might call science communications now. She called it poetical science, you know, really creating an image that could live in people's minds, even if they weren't particularly scientifically minded themselves. I mean, he had a very crabby, grudge-holding personality, and in one letter, she laid out a plan to make the analytical engine a reality in which she would essentially do the public-facing side of the project, because as you mentioned, the difference engine had relied on government grants. So if you can't sell government representatives on the idea, they're not going to keep funding the project. And he would stick to the math side. He turned the idea down. He didn't want to go into business together to that extent, but he remained very grateful to her. He called her my dear and much admired interpreter in one letter. So he really did understand what she was doing for the project. And he signed off one letter as your faithful slave. He had a lot of gratitude for what she was putting into the project from her side. And it's all the more remarkable given that so much had changed over this, 17-year correspondence. They met, she was a teenage debutante, but by this point she was a married mother. She had 3 children with her husband, William King, who was another aristocrat who had a passionate interest in science. He would later become the Earl of Lovelace, and that was then she became styled as Ada, Countess of Lovelace. Until this, she'd been Ada Milbank, or Ada Byron, as she was being referred to. And as well as having 3 children, she also managed to fit in a series of extramarital flings and a gambling problem, proving that women really can have it all.
Yeah. This is the thing, isn't it? I think looking back, and she's been much celebrated in the 21st century because women in STEM subjects, frankly, have been looking back through history and saying who was the first. And, I don't mean to disparage that in any way at all, but if you look at her biography in the round, I sort of think her correspondence with Babbage was her thing. Like, that was the thing she was really proud of. That was the thing where she was able to exercise her intellectual curiosity. The rest of her life often left something to be desired. And so it came to 1841, when Babbage is trying to raise money, actually. That's what's happening for his analytic engine. He's got this new idea of what we would now call, I suppose, really a personal computer rather than a calculator. And he's trying to get money from the British government. The British government had said, what happened to the difference engine, mate? We gave you the money for that. So he's had to go to Italy to try and get some respect for the project there, in the hope that then the Brits will be embarrassed. Oh, on the continent, they understand what Babbage is up to. We better support him financially. And so he goes and gives a lecture in Italy, in Turin. And that is written about in an academic journal in Switzerland in French. And who's the person to translate this into English? Well, of course, it's Jack of all trades, Ada, isn't it? Who speaks perfect French and says, I want to translate this for an English audience to explain what your lecture was about and explain what your analytic engine would be. But she doesn't just translate it. She takes it much further than that.
Yes, exactly. So she was working really, really closely with Babbage, but often she was teasing out his ideas and expanding them to help make them comprehensible. But she also supplemented the article with her own extensive notes, which included a method for calculating Bernoulli numbers using the machine. And Bernoulli numbers are a sequence of rational numbers that have applications in various areas of mathematics, considered to be the first algorithm specifically tailored for implementation on a computer, which is the thing that makes Lovelace the first computer programmer. So she wasn't just trying to translate this thing from French to English, nor was she just trying to encourage Babbage to get his thoughts in order, but she was also adding her own thoughts to the project.
Yeah, she also holds the distinction of inadvertently creating the first computer bug, because modern programmers who translated the algorithm into current programming languages discovered there is actually a small typo that would make it unusable in the original form in which it was printed. But I think this is the thing, like, her legacy is such a matter of debate, because to some she was, a significant practical innovator who influenced the computer. To others, she was just a very intelligent sideline figure whose gender, makes her a novelty for this period.
And I think part of the thing that's so sort of, I don't know, almost frustrating about the character that Lovelace has become is that you can see all this potential in not only what she was doing at the time, but what she could have done later. But unfortunately, at the age of 36, her health completely collapsed. I mean, she'd had problems with it for a long, long time. And eventually she developed cancer and died quite young. And I think that that's left a whole lot of unanswered questions about what her contribution to science and specifically computing could have been. Because there was this moment where Babbage wanted to develop a version of his machine that played tic-tac-toe, and she talked him out of it, realizing that, or in her mind, thinking that that would trivialize the stuff that they were trying to do together. And I don't know that that was the right decision, because actually that's the sort of thing that can capture the public imagination. But at the same time, she was right in so many other ways about getting their message across, and I think ultimately her success in that department is the thing that could have gone much further and that was kind of deprived the world due to her early death.
Yeah, she named Babbage the executor in her will. She'd fallen out with her husband pretty definitively by this point. They were very estranged by the time she died. So she obviously trusted him more than her own family to administer her estate by that point.
Well, this does bring us to the question, doesn't it, of whether she saw him as a father figure, a mentor, or whether there was something spicy going on. He did say, "Come back and see my prototype."
This was the etchings of its time.
Right, exactly.
And so another week of retrospecting ends. But next week begins a day early at Club Retrospectors. Join us now to get an exclusive episode every Sunday. Patreon.com/retrospectors.